Hi guys, and welcome to episode 79 of the PT Education Podcast. We're on the road today, me and Mr. Shiby, aren't we? How are you, mate? You excited to be here?
Mate, I'm very excited. We're in London. I always get overexcitable. Come in here, have a coffee, which gets me excited. Anyway, a bit of a buzz of London from our quiet town, Tunbridge Wells. Yeah. It's nice to be in a different environment, as we were saying, isn't it?
And the weather's banging.
And the weather is really nice. So yeah, really happy to be here. And we've got a guest interview. It's always great speaking to new people, find out about them. And I think today's going to be a really good conversation. But before we go any further, how you doing, mate?
Mate, I'm all right, actually. Had a good week. September's a good time because it feels like a time when all the clients come back. Because through the summer, especially our clients at Tunbridge Wells, they're away a lot. And then like even from January through, clients go away skiing, and then you've got the Easter holidays. Whereas September through December feels like everyone's about. No one really goes away in October. So we're super busy down at the studio at the moment, which is really cool. So we're busy, but it's good to get up here, a bit of a novel stimulus, to be away and do something slightly different. We normally do this at home, so to do it in the studio is pretty cool, isn't it? Are you all good, mate?
I'm good, mate. Yeah, no, it's been a good week. Been excited about to come up here. Been learning a little bit more about breath work recently. That's been on my mind recently. Doing a few breath work classes, a sound bath, which is like where you just kind of like listen to music or sound for an hour and a half. So and learning a little more about the science of it as well, and more about kind of relaxing, something I struggle to do. I'm not very good at being chilled and laid back. So learning to get my body more relaxed and more chilled and getting into the meditation stuff. So it's actually, I never thought I'd be saying this, but trying to develop that side of my character. It's a challenge for me, but it's something I've been sort of putting my head into recently.
Well, maybe we'll come back to that conversation later on within the podcast.
As we go about psychology.
I think that might be interesting. So, our guest today works from Integra up in London. Her name is Roberta Watts.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Much need to be that closer. The only reason I say that is because Paul told me off last time because it wasn't close enough. His voice is just fucking good anyway. You could put the mic on the other side of the room and you'd hear shame, so it wouldn't even matter. How are you?
I'm good. We've just got back from holiday. It's my first week back in the studio. I'm fully booked and it has been busy, but it's been really great to see everyone. Like you said, September to December or October, everyone's here, so
it's flat out,
it's great, isn't it? Yeah. People are in a good mood from the summer. They're ready to get... I think you get restored in the summer holidays. Well, hopefully. Even if you've got kids, there is some level of restoration. And then you come back and work seems like you're ready to go with the flow and get cracking.
Where did you guys go? Did you guys go to America?
We went to America and we went to Portugal. We were very lucky this year. Yep.
That's awesome.
We went on a huge adventure in the US and we got to see the desert, which I've never seen.
That's cool.
That was outstanding. We got to go up into the mountains, go to the sea, and chill out by a pool.
That's awesome.
Very good.
That's very nice.
Wow.
And in terms of when we've met, just to take the conversation sort of more towards the career side of things. Yeah. So I met you the first time. It must have been one of my sessions with Michael, right? And then you got and maybe Dan was there as well.
Dan was there as well, yeah.
So how long? I've never really had the opportunity to ask you these questions. So how long have you been at Integra?
So I've been at Integra for 9 and a bit years. I actually started as a student.
Right.
In 2014, I was training at another gym, and this amazing osteopath, Elaine Tilley, who I work with, she was going on the RTS course. And I just finished my PT certification, and she said, "Oh, these trainers, lots of trainers in the industry are really wanting to go on this course. It's going to be really beneficial." And I remember her first telling me about it and me going, no, that's way out of my league. I've only just passed. And she went, "Oh no, I'm going to be on it, so I'll go with you." And it was my birthday, so I was allowed to go. Right. And a big present from my mum. And I went on the first weekend and it kind of rocked my world as a student, because it started off, now it's in 2 3-day weekends, but before it was in 3 2-day weekends.
Right.
So spine and trunk, lower extremity, upper extremity. And just being in an environment that felt incredibly open, had structure to it, but then just crazy insight was something that really struck me by surprise. And when you go back every month as a part of that journey, it was like, I want to be here. I want to work here. This looks really good. And basically you couldn't get rid of me. So
did you just not leave?
I did not leave. Yeah. So I went from student to client to employee and now co-owner. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I have to say, I think when I did it, it was the same thing that you were talking about, where it was 3 2-day weekends, upper extremity, lower extremity, core, something like that. And it did, even so, I was the other end of my career to you, not that I'm at the end, hopefully, but I was like 10 years in.
Yeah.
And so, it rocked my world. James hasn't been on it yet, but we're going to get you on the mechanics course. It did, because it was like, he explained things, and Paul explains this really well. Paul Standell explains it really well. It's like questions that I hadn't even answered, but I definitely wouldn't have known the answer to. Paul uses the lateral raise explanation. Why is it so hard at the top and not the bottom? And it was such an interesting insight, but also the sort of people that are on it are inspiring people. Yeah. Michael's a brilliant educator anyway, but then you get the sort of people that go on it are so inspiring. And one of the things we think about, especially for new trainers, is one of the most important things is to put yourself in the environment with passionate people who want to learn, and where you feel like you can fuck up and say something wrong, and it's a nice environment for that. And I think RTS really creates that.
Michael in particular, as an educator, my experience with him and as a communicator was something that was really different. Yeah. It was the subtlety, the questioning, the actual listening to what it was. Like, whenever I used to struggle with an answer, when you go, I don't know, and you just sort of, your I don't know is please don't ask me anymore because I don't want to be challenged. Yeah. And I think he had always had this moment of a pause where, in the gentlest way, wouldn't let me get away with it. Yeah. And so it's like, hold on, go back, tell me what you do know, start from the beginning and work it through. And I think having a guidance system where somebody already knows the answers but isn't keen to tell you it is there to help you critically develop that thinking skill to go, could it be this? Could it be that? And I think his teaching, supporting obviously all of the material in RTS, such as the list of possible reasons for something, gave me the opportunity to really consider each aspect of what I was doing and trying to do. And it's the mechanical process that I've learned in RTS has taken me all the way through to personal therapy, self-development and communication, which is what we're talking about today. So
I just want to pick up on a point you said there with Michael, and it's such an important point though for us as communicators, and the mistakes I made on it earlier in my career and still do, to be honest. It's the ability for him, even though he's got the answers and those things, to park the ego and not to want, because I've been in positions when I know an answer and I feel like, well, in order for you to pay your session fee, I'm going to give you the answer because that's where the value is and I have the answer. And that's normally not necessarily the right way to go, because you want them to explore it for themselves. And I think in communication, when we can park the ego and just allow someone to explore that, as I've tried to do that over time, and it's always an ongoing process, isn't it, to become better at it.
Yeah, for all of us.
For all of us, right?
For all of us.
But that's actually something that's a really interesting thing, because you've learned to come away, and the communication side of how he delivers the course is super interesting. Yeah. And to be able to park that ego, which I think a lot of people struggle with. When you first pass a course and you think you have all the answers. What's that graph? The one where you initially think you know everything, and then you go through a stage of thinking you don't know anything. Do you know the one I'm talking about? I can't for the life of me remember the name. Someone will fucking tell us at some point. You can swear on this, by the way. I've already done it 3 times. At the first 10 seconds in our first podcast, I swore, didn't I? There's that graph where you come out with not much knowledge, but thinking you know everything.
Yeah, it's actually a theory, isn't it? It's like somebody's come up with a name of it, and I can't remember what it is.
And then the more you study, the more you realise you don't know. And at times it can almost be like, oh, shit, I really don't know that much. And then it comes like an underlying confidence. Yeah. If we can shift it now, because as you said quite rightly, we want to move into the communication side. Yeah. What's your background, the sort of courses you've been doing in that side of things?
Well, it's kind of an interesting one. So in terms of courses, communication alone, I've gone on communication courses from Nonviolent Communication, which was by a guy called Marshall B. Rosenberg. And that was really intriguing for me because my background has a lot been going on a self-development journey. Right. So like getting into the industry, my brother died. Right. So I was actually involved in exercise personally because it gave me something to control. And it, to an extent, numbed the pain, because you can create a different stimulus in the gym than you can when you're just alone. And so I went to the gym. It was my sort of saving grace, really, especially gyms that were open 24/7, because when you can't sleep, the gym was there. Probably too far on the unhealthy end of the spectrum, which quite a lot of us have explored and hopefully recovered from. And then my journey forward was just seeking out ways to get better, or to, I guess, get help in some way. And so that led me on to courses such as RTS, believe it or not, because it was about self-development. Wanting to help people was such a big part of my experience, thinking to have a purpose, to be in so much pain and to recognize there's so much out there in the world, how can I make a difference? How can I make an impact? And so I continued on going down my exercise route, which actually led me to Integra, which led me to coaching. And that coaching that I was doing one-to-one, that very quickly was about business and turned very inward very sharply. It was basically whatever struggles I was experiencing in business, they're actually personal issues. And so that led me to trying to understand how I communicate, because I could sense, see, and witness that I was very abrupt. I was quite, thinking I was direct, that ego element. I struggle with the word ego sometimes because I think there's a reason that it exists and it's a protective mechanism. And so often when we say ego, we're talking about it with a level of judgment, and it's sort of like, oh, the ego, as if everyone's being arrogant with it. But certainly that can come out. And it was me learning that actually I can't communicate in this way if I want to get to where I want to go. And all these different communication tools, working with a coach was great because the way that she spoke was really intriguing, asking me questions, very much like Michael. And then she introduced me to nonviolent communication. Back then, I didn't really pay too much attention to it until another scenario came up in my life. And nonviolent communication it's actually speaking from the heart. So it's about learning how to say what you're feeling, what you're needing, and then making requests. And that kind of triggered a real reality inside of me that actually I'm responsible for myself, me as an individual, and as well as the people that I work with, they're responsible for themselves. And so it started to give me an understanding of separation between two entities, and that actually communication and information flows from one side to another. Marshall's work was phenomenal because it was on the extreme end of emotion, which was used to feeling and experiencing. And it gave me hope and a way out to resolve. And from that, it was kind of like, oh, here's this communication strategy that helps me say what I'm feeling and needing, and basically deal with my emotions more easily. It is in and of itself quite a long process. So it is one probably for the personal if you're to start off with it. And as I was going through that, Michael actually was the one that reminded me of it. And then he told me about Kathy McDonald's course that was coming up. And he said, she is phenomenal. She's used to be an international hostage negotiator with just a wonderful spirit and exceptional knowledge and experience. And so I went on one of her courses, and what she offered me that was like the next layer of communication, understanding and perspective was strategy. So NVC is great for being able to be one-on-one. It's about connection, but it's about the real deep and loving side. And not many people would feel comfortable doing that in business. It's not the first thing that you go to. And then Kathy's course, the masterclass that she was teaching at the time, was so clear and transparent, and really helped me understand that the heart of communication is that everyone's got an agenda, and you've got to get clear on what that is in order to get the outcome that you want. So my courses have gone, to answer your question quite long-windedly. No. My communication has been from nonviolent communication, Kathy's work, and then I took a year off of my work and did a lot of therapy, dedicated the whole year to it, and through that study, communication came from that as well.
Well, that's quite the journey.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that, Roberta. It's, it sounds like you've been through some difficult times with it as well. It sounds like sort of what got you into exercise and what was driving you was sort of a kind of sense of control, I think you were saying originally. Yeah. And you've sort of been on this kind of whole long journey with it to be sort of where you are now. And sometimes when people are seeing people from the outside, they're not aware of what's led them to be the person that they are, and the work and the energy and the dedication that you've put into be where you are now. It must have been hard.
Yeah, it was, and everybody has it. Everybody's got extreme experiences at one end of the scale or another. And I think, just like what you said, everybody we see at face value, we don't know what their experience is or where they've been or what they've endured. And I think just having that as an awareness, without it all sounding really quite low and sadly emotional, I think that awareness will help us help them thrive. And so for me, it always comes back to understanding barriers. What are the barriers to growth? What are the barriers to this person listening to me? What is the barrier to me listening to this person? And so that hardship has really given me the opportunity to explore and choose how I want to show up in the world, and for my clients.
There is a deliberate intent, isn't there, every day in the person that we decide that we want to be and how we want to sort of show up.
Yes.
That version of ourselves is dictated by that sort of personal development. It sounds like you've done a lot of work on yourself. A lot of time we focus on the external, what do I learn to tell people, or how do I communicate? And it's that journey of that emotional awareness and that emotional intelligence that you've developed. It's clearly like some emotional boundaries that you've managed to sort of put in place as well through a lot of therapy and a lot of work. And I suppose something I see in our industry is we work closely with people, but we often don't do as much work on ourselves as we need to.
Yep.
We're quite good at telling people what they need to do and trying to give information out, but that personal development piece is something I talk a lot about, and we talk a lot about at PT Education. Is it something that you feel's missing a little bit in our industry?
Absolutely. And actually that was my secret angle that I was telling you about earlier, because I was really thinking about it, and I've been doing some study this week, and I really delve into we're saying communication, but it really is it's understanding. And so that's really what I'm always curious about. How do I really understand this or that? Because I think for a long time I spent feeling like I don't understand things, and then that would lead to self-judgment. And then actually the process of RTS and the work that I've done, understanding the nonviolent communication process, I understood that empathy as a practice is actually the process of understanding. So I can be brave enough now to go and try any topic, project, talk to any highly esteemed, knowledgeable person I like. And as long as I know how to summarize back to them my understanding, I've got potential to go forward. And so I think the personal development aspect of being a personal trainer is essential, almost is critical to, well, one, I think self-fulfillment, because this job is a challenge. It's hard work. Yeah. If you want to be excellent, and I don't mean perfect, because we all know you're cruising for a bruising if you do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you want to be excellent and you want to feel like, I showed up there, I know that was a good session, even if it wasn't perfect for that client, I know I gave my absolute best.
Yeah.
Then that self-development work has to be done, because you got to know what your best is, and you got to know what's getting in the way of your best. And I think that's where it came back to those barriers. And I think you can start in many ways of the self-reflection process. And I think from a communication, if we were just talking about communication, you could start with, what are your barriers to listening? You could just start there. You don't even need to go into therapy, because the barriers of what you're struggling to, why am I struggling to hear this? What is it that this person's talking about that either turns me off or makes me want to go, no, I'm right, listen to me instead. That's already going to be enough insight to give you somewhere to go to create a positive change already. So you've got multiple ways of going down the personal development route, but an unwillingness to look inwards or to be curious is probably not going to get you very far.
You just said James's favourite word. You love be curious, don't you?
I think it starts with that introspective look before that extrospective look. So it starts with looking within, looking at why we might react a certain way, why we might judge, why we might have these preconceived ideas of the people that we're working with, and then we have to think, well, why am I thinking like that? What's my barriers to, as you said, listening? What's my previous experiences? Yes, I mean, I personally found therapy really useful, but actually that's only one aspect of personal development. It hasn't got to be therapy. It could be reading books. You could be having good conversations like we are in this room. I'm getting personal development just through listening to you. That's making me think and making me reflect. And there's so many ways to do it, but I don't think we're prioritising it enough, because looking at yourself can sometimes be a bit uncomfortable. Looking at your own flaws and looking at things that you're not doing quite right, which we are all making mistakes constantly every day, and that's okay. You said the word sort of judgment. It's quite easy to judge yourself, and actually we get taught to be, or hopefully something we talk a lot about is trying to be sort of non-judgmental towards our clients, but also need to be non-judgmental towards ourselves and realise we're all just trying to get a bit better every day.
Yeah.
And it's just a process, and it's one that's really rewarding, because I don't think it just impacts your professional career. I think it impacts your personal life, and I feel like for you there's been a big intertwine between your personal life and your professional life. And I don't know if you've seen development in one area connecting to the other at all.
Oh, phenomenally. Yes. Yeah, that's 100% accurate. And if the personal work that I've done has transformed me as a personal trainer, because it's helped me understand, I guess, it's kind of a funny thing. I'm going to admit it. But so Michael, as you know, is obviously my business partner, but he's also my life partner. He taught me how to read a map. North, south, east and west. And I've always been geographically challenged, but now I probably know LA better than I know London.
Yeah.
And in doing so, there's a lot of crossover for me in the sort of philosophical sense that understanding, being able to find out where you are and being able to understand where you've been is how you start to lay that map of a self. Because often, they say that in therapy that you've got a true self and then you've obviously got the ego. The ego was created to protect the wounded parts of you. So you can see it there's multiple different ways of sort of saying it, but it's just a protective mechanism. And it's a valid thing. It needs to be there. And so coming back to your point a minute ago, saying that, it's uncomfortable to do self-reflection, we're actually designed not to look at the things within us that could be unsafe. So if I've got judgment upon myself and that creates shame, I'm going to avoid that. Catherine McDonald talks about the law of approach and the law of avoid. And whether it's communication with someone else or communication with yourself, if it's uncomfortable, you're not going to want to go there. But there is an environment and there is a support, I think, that is out there in the world. I found mine through Integra. I found it through online support structures, and I started to learn that the more that you pull in of support, non-judgmental people, creating, colleagues and people like yourselves that want you to be here to listen, to not think that you're bad. When you start to feel like you've got people that aren't going to judge you, and I think therapy helps with this if you find the right therapist, you start to feel like you don't need to judge yourself, and actually you can sit there for a minute and get curious, because I feel like curiosity is a luxury. And Brené Brown has got an acronym for trust, and it's called BRAVING. I'm not going to go through it, but because it's quite long. But in it, she really explains that without boundaries, you can't have vulnerability. And it's like, you can't, unless you can recognize something as a little bit safe, you're not going to be willing to look inwards. So self-reflection is a two-part process of needing to make sure that you have got a level of support you need, and that might be people, which obviously is critical, it's incredibly important, but it's also the time and the space to look inward. And being a personal trainer, when you're working with 30, 40, 50 clients a week, for me they're all too big a numbers, because the level of self-care gets compromised in my world just based on a factor of time. To look inward, find that discomfort and go deep on it in order to create an understanding of it, you need space away from the people that you're trying to serve. So it's needed in the industry. It's something that I think could be better guided, because we don't have any rules or any real big support structure. But there also needs to be an understanding of the prerequisites that you need before you can go there.
I think there's three things that you I'm going to pull out from there in terms of trainers that I found helpful. You've got the empathy side, which when you do it properly is a game changer, isn't it? I use the example, always forget the film and I have again, where a film tells it from one character's perspective and seeing everyone and how they behave. So you see it from this one person's perspective and you think, that person's an idiot, that person's treating them badly, that's a nice person. And then the film flips and it tells it from a different story, different person's perspective, and you start to empathize for why that person is the way they are. And if you can start to do that with your clients and truly empathize with what they're saying, but that requires listening, which was the second bit that you said, which is where you have to actually stop and listen to the person properly. And you call it active listening, right? It was called active listening, where you're not just waiting for the person to stop so you can say what you want to say, because then you stop listening, right? Because you're just thinking, I'm ready to, I've already loaded up what I'm going to say next, so you stop listening. So it's like, can you actually listen to them, look at the way their body language is and take in what they're trying to say, and truly empathize? And the third thing was the safe space that you provide for them, because unless you do those two things, it feels like you don't provide a safe enough space for them to open up. And without those three things, how are you going to even begin to overcome the barriers that they've got, and you've got as well, but they've got to help them change and move forward in the things that you've obviously discussed them and you know, but how are you going to enable them to create that space and time and reflection within your sessions to enable them to do that? And there's three things that you've spoken about and you've pulled out today that I try really hard now to try and create as best as I can with my current level of being able to do it. And the conversations that I've had within sessions, of course, gone deeper, and they're far more rewarding. And I've seen the last 2 or 3 years, along with my sessions with my mechanics, but that communication side and being able to listen better, people have been able to, I've had more success with clients, although it's their success really, in them being able to change. And a small part of that is just me being better at those few things. So I think it's super interesting you brought those up, because it's something you talk about a lot as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's nice to have it first time meeting you already. Yeah. So I'm like, oh, yes. This has been worth. I'm loving it. So
it's going to be a good podcast. Knew it.
Use it to my ears. Yeah. I mean, Catherine McDonald's work, I also agree. I think art of communication, some of her stuff, and really good at kind of starting to understand other people's wants and needs and desires and values, which I found really, really useful. And Brené Brown's work on vulnerability and empathy as well, really been a game changer. Something personally that I found hit home with her work was the vulnerability and how much I've struggled with it personally, and to be really open, honest and vulnerable due to my background and my past about basically never showing any vulnerability. But then she really highlighted like the importance of it and how it builds that depth and connection and trust, not just with clients, but also in my personal relationships and friendships as well. I mean, what's your journey been like with vulnerability and sort of being able to sort of tap into that part of your sort of character?
Well, Brené Brown was the first book I actually read. So when I say my background was a bit rough and I had some therapy, I mean, my background was quite a bit rough. So in terms of limiting self-beliefs, I used to think I was very stupid. I didn't think I had any level of intelligence, and I didn't think I could read. And it wasn't until, I'm feeling a little bit emotional, guys. Yeah, it wasn't until I went to Integra and I was an employee, where I had all of these colleagues around me that have got master's degrees, and Martina Avellino is a doctor, and people have gone and travelled to the US and worked with RTS Mastery, or they're a neuroscientist. I went and worked with Jacques Henri Taylor for 2 weeks out in the US and got to do an internship with him. And there's being in a room full of incredibly smart individuals, and so, which is always the way I kind of see it, like you put yourself in situations where you're meant to overcome those limiting self-beliefs. And in the beginning, the reading one was huge. Did not think I could read. And I remember Michael going, just pick up a book. He was like, just have a look. He was like, you haven't got to read it, you haven't got to understand it. He went, if you can physically read words that are on your phone, you can read. He was like, there's nothing wrong. I was like, okay, all right, just give it a try. But he's one of them where he's a seed planter. Never a pusher, always a seed planter. So over time, I'd be like, no, and I'd pick up neurobiology, or I'd pick up biomechanics, or I'd pick up, he's got loads of stuff on coaching, self-development. The bookshelf is, you've seen it.
It's full.
It's full.
It's definitely full.
And then I remember I started to get curious, and I started to read just some titles, and I realised that I could understand a paragraph. And then you start to sort of ease your way into it. And then a friend of mine actually gave me the book, Brené Brown's Rising Strong. And because I was on this self-development journey, it was quite evident, I think, from the beginning. And she gave me this book. I just opened, I think, the first page, and it was Brené Brown talking about the quote, which was the Roosevelt quote that she actually came across after she gave her first TED Talk on vulnerability. And I remember reading it, and I've even got them now, where there was goosebumps. And she can say the whole thing a lot better than I can, but I just remember it being about, it's not about it's not about, what is it? I'm going to simplify it if I can and paraphrase.
So I paraphrase a lot, don't I?
And get it completely wrong.
I get it completely wrong. It doesn't even matter.
But it's based on you being the person in the arena. And so you're the only person that counts. And then anyone else who's got an opinion on your life or in your life, unless they're in the arena with you, fighting for their own life, like trying to get better, their opinion does not count. And that was basically what she needed to hear at that time. And it just really inspired me to turn over the page. And so I started reading and going through this information, and the excitement that I felt that someone is speaking to me. She understands how difficult it is to be vulnerable, and she's saying it in a really chilled, Texan, loose kind of way, even though she's, again, incredible intelligence. She's a professional researcher on vulnerability and shame. And so going through it, it was like, oh, that's why this does that. Oh, that's why I feel like this. And very quickly became aware that for someone who's very chatty and very much good at being with other people and their problems, more of a saviour complex at the time, I thought I was very vulnerable. But listening to other people's struggles is totally different than being really honest about what it is that are my pain points that I struggle with. And so vulnerability was the gateway. It was the gateway, and it was the gateway to possibility. But again, the immediate thing that came up was, what's my barrier? And the barrier was shame. And as you know in the books, if you've read Brené Brown's work, is that shame is the limiting factor to vulnerability. And so that led me to therapy. That led me to a ton of reading. I'm so proud of my bookshelf. I've got like 300 books on everything, all different types of therapy, healing strategies, progression, self-development. And that deep dive of the year that I took really helped me uncover a lot of the shame. I got support from a lot of therapists and different modalities like breath work, like meditation, like listening to music or going for a walk. And it was a whole shock to my nervous system. It's a full body experience when you're going through it, but to come through the other side and to have empathized with myself, right? It's self-empathy first. That is what, as they say in therapy, is like it alchemizes the pain. It's the thing where you go, oh, it wasn't my fault, but this is basically who I am. This is why I'm like it. This is what I've got to. Now, if I want to go further in life, for wherever I want to go in my personal relationships, in my professional relationships, what do I need to do to change? And believe it or not, the RTS Continuum Training Manual helped me because of the mechanical aspect of having to measure everything. So when it comes to talking about how trainers are going to communicate with their clients, I've got strategies. I've got solid written down pathways that I have tried and tested and decided, did that work for me? Oh, here's my reflection question today. And actually it's going to give me an actual next action rather than it being, oh, I think I'm getting a little bit better. It's like, I know I'm getting better at this today because this person reflected back to me that they felt heard, understood and respected, and that I got what it is that they want from me and this service that I'm offering as a personal trainer.
That's so important, that reflection bit, because it is important to reflect on the sessions for your own growth and to also to point out your blind spots. And I went for years without reflecting on sessions, and as far as I was concerned, I'm busy, so I'm good. In reality, part of it was getting on well with people when you're in a busy studio, but when you start to reflect, it's so powerful because then you can understand where your weak spots are, hopefully, if you're honest, because it's easy to also create the narrative and not be honest, and start to fill those gaps and educate yourself. I have to be honest, I think pretty much the same as you. My personal development started, James used to mentor me. And obviously, we've become very good friends since then. Yeah. But James used to mentor me and had a big impact on me at the start of my career. Not too dissimilar, but it sounds with you and Michael. Yeah. Except for we're not life partners yet.
Not yet.
Working on it.
But he had a big impact on me in terms of inspiring me to want to personally develop, because I didn't have it. I wasn't taught it, so I didn't really have it within me. It's something I learned. Yeah. Where was I going with this? Personal development? Reflection. And it was so important to start to reflect on, why am I busy? But also, where are my weak spots? And then start to take responsibility and create a path forward. That's where I was going to go before that, sorry.
That's right.
The RTS.
Yes.
I agree. There's something within that course, although my personal development started probably 2015, 2014 with James. The way, and again, I think you're right. Yes, RTS is brilliant in terms of the stuff that Tom's created, but the way that Michael educates and teaches, it inspires you to want to develop because of the way he teaches.
Yeah.
So he reflects back at you and he gives you the space to be wrong and right.
Yeah.
And then the things he talks about means that you become hopefully more curious, and so you go off on that personal development thing, but it all comes back to that initial and true and honest reflection in yourself, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And also creating that for your clients, because we were talking about it recently on the podcast. You can become the cheerleading personal trainer where everything they do, even if it was shit, you're just saying how good it is.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying you're going to say things are shit, but it's also you've created a relationship with your clients to be open and honest with them about areas that maybe together you need to look at, and not just tell them everything is brilliant, because that way you don't create a reflection on them for them to see where they need to improve. And I think that's another word that I just pulled out from what you're saying there, which I think is super important for young trainers or trainers anywhere in their career. Can you honestly reflect with what you're doing and your own level of progression? Because if you're asking people to progress themselves, like we are really as good coaches, if you're not doing that for yourself, can you truly then ask that of people that are coming to you for coaching? And I think for me personally, it's something, when it comes to personal development, I feel like we need to walk that as well, so we can really understand what that journey is about.
Yeah.
I don't know if you feel like the way you coach now, is that something you go down as like you want to help people personally develop and not just achieve fitness, or does it depend on the client?
Yeah, good question. It depends. As always in communication, there is multiple layers to it. So, I was actually doing a nutrition coaching session yesterday, and it became very clear that the problem with nutrition is not about nutrition. And that's much the same with exercise, either the problem with exercise or the reason people are doing it. These are all things that meet our needs. And I think clients don't necessarily know that losing body fat is meeting this need over here. They just think, oh, that is the need to lose body fat, or to get healthier or to increase in strength. There's always a deeper need. There's something that needs to be understood, I think, in our industry, that we are serving a greater goal than the thing that is just in front of us. But we are only paid for the thing that is just in front of us. So I kind of see it as a multiple layer thing. So from exercise perspective, I believe it's my absolute duty to understand exercise mechanics. From a personal integrity perspective, if I'm going to deliver exercise, I need to know what I'm doing, because ultimately, as long as I'm doing what I'm doing and I'm doing it well, a result should take place. Yeah. Right? Even if it's just strength. Yeah. I don't even want to dumb it down to just being strength, because that in and of itself has power. But there's so many aspects of the physical experience of delivering exercise that it offers. So you have that element. I want to be really fucking good at that. That's my number one. That's why we're exercise mechanics. But without actually knowing how to explore another individual, understand their background, understand their weekly routine, understand why it is that way, because their timings, the amount they work, the times they eat or don't eat, how much time they spend with their kids or don't spend with their kids, the amount they go out to the pub or don't go out to the pub, everything is meeting another need. And so to understand, coming back to Kathy's work, people's bubble, it's about understanding what is meeting their values, beliefs, needs and wants every day. And when they present to us a goal that is actually really far away from their current lifestyle, we've got to somehow go on a journey with them. And we've got to be able to, as you say, not say something's really shit when it's really shit, but actually be able to present back to someone expectation. Yeah. And I think through creating a non-judgmental environment, through, again, coming back to the hostage negotiation work that Kathy's literally relayed to me, I think of everything now as a strategy. My pace, pitch and tone when I communicate, the way that I'm going to word this question. I can instantly see if I've said something that I meant to be a little bit better than it came out and it doesn't land.
Yeah, you can.
And then the speed of reversal and knowing whether or not that reversal worked to help this person hear what I've got to say next, because I've empathized. And empathy is a really interesting one, because empathy alone is a version of counselling. Empathy with strategy is a version of coaching. And so I think the two always go hand in hand when it comes to helping a client get to where they want to go. But the same is true for us as personal trainers, which is why, coming back to your point about, do you think personal trainers need to reflect? Yes. But they need to know how.
Yeah.
Like, we need to, I'm already really inspired about it, and I'm doing work in the background because I want to support personal trainers in knowing how to ask the question. You know, if they don't know what to ask, they're just opening themselves up for a battering.
Yeah.
Because they're just going to go, am I good? No, I'm shit. Okay, great. That's not a good enough reflection. So that's why focusing on the specifics of communication, like listening, asking open-ended questions, knowing how to deal with resistance, you know, all of these really strategic elements are going to be a big part in creating change for that client or that individual. But it doesn't happen without empathy first.
And it takes practice. It's one of those things, isn't it? One of the books that Michael recommended to me actually was Motivational Interviewing in Health and Fitness.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting read, and they make it sound so easy within the book, but because they're so good at it and they've studied it for so long, and you try and practice, and you don't always get it right. Like you say with the reversal out, it's like, you know, the reason I chuckled is because you know when you've said something, fuck, that's not come out how I meant it to come out, or maybe it did, but they've misunderstood my intention, or because obviously, as you say, communications, I'm going to break something down and then communicate it to someone. It doesn't mean that they're going to then absorb that exactly the way I meant it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it might not even be my mistake, I say in quotations if you're watching on the video, but I still haven't communicated in the right way for them.
Yes.
And so you have to practice this, don't you? And that's, I think, sometimes the thing, that maybe you ask a difficult question and you have to give them that silence, and it's a bit awkward. And so then you do it once, you think, oh, I felt uncomfortable as well, I'm not going to do it again. But the better you get at it and the more you practice it and you give people space, something that James talks about is asking a question and then giving someone the space to answer it. And that doesn't mean they're going to instantly answer you. Maybe it's a 10, 15, 20-second thing. And have you got the capability and confidence in yourself to sit and leave them with it? And that's hard, isn't it? I mean, we've spoken about that quite a lot, haven't you? Do you find that, do you find yourself in that situation where you ask a question and you just need to let them sit and give them, I mean, have you ever sat for a minute in silence? We struggled for 10 seconds at the start of this podcast, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
Without chuckling.
Without a giggle.
To give someone that time, I think, is super important. And I know initially when I started, I'd feel too awkward. I'd want to fill the gap.
Yeah.
But do you feel comfortable, especially in Integra, because it's a nice space to work? Are they the sort of conversations you'll have where you'll just leave someone and let them sit with it?
They are. I've got to say, it's still practice for me too.
It's hard, isn't it?
Like what we said earlier, having all the knowledge is one aspect of this. But being a practitioner, which is what Kathy is, and I think I've done one-to-one with Kathy for, I think, 3 or 4 years now, and we've done so many sessions, and every single time I come out of there just gobsmacked by the new layer of information that I've just gained. But yet to put it into practice is like, oh God, I tried this. And I remember one of her practices she gave me was go away and for the rest of the week, every conversation you have, just emotionally label for them. And I was like, oh God. And so emotional labeling is you either do it with the actual emotion that you're seeing, or which men are more factual than emotional from a language perspective. So for a man, instead of saying, oh, you're feeling really sad about that, it's really upsetting, isn't it? Instead of saying that, I might say, that's really tough. You know, or instead of saying, oh, you seem so excited and like you love your family, which was one of the reflections in my head, I had to change it to, oh, your face really lights up when you talk about your daughter. And so being able to be versatile and to know who you're speaking to, which is kind of the same 5 questions that are in RTS, who, goal, have, own, tolerate. Yeah. You just add communication into those 5 questions and it's the same process. And you've got to try and, I try constantly to figure out what is the purpose of this communication experience right now. And you can't do it all the time. It's exhausting. When you've got 7 or 8 sessions in a day,
100%,
do it in one and then reflect on that one later, because you're never going to remember all the 7. But especially this week, put in the work into practice, reflecting afterwards and going, how can I listen better? But better yet, what am I listening for? Coming back to that purpose. And that's where Kathy's work, I don't know how much you guys have explored. I mean, it's really a
I haven't
shame
much.
that she's closing it because, you know, she knows already that I don't want her to. But she's got so much to offer, and there's because of the strategy that it offers, I think it's the opportunity for a trainer to create that space for themselves, because those 60 seconds of silence isn't just about letting the other person figure it out. It's about you sitting there and knowing the impact of the question that you're asking, being able to witness what changes are happening in the other person, whether or not this is going to, because if they don't answer, what are you going to say? It's like, you might say, why don't you think about it? You might really embrace the discomfort, which I can only do occasionally, if I'm really honest. Like, I will grip my toes underneath the table while I'm asking a really tough question because I hate the silence. But really, I think you learn in practice that I'm asking this question to you, the client, because I genuinely feel from my experience, practice and expertise that if you're able to answer this, it's going to help you get closer to your goal.
Yeah.
And this achievement in exercise, or this achievement in an event, this achievement in losing body fat is all a part of a bigger identity where we're helping them fulfill that. And that will bring fulfillment to their lives. So quite a long-winded way of rounding off what you said, but I'm trying to include the fact that it's much more than personal training delivering the exercise, yet that's what I'm here for.
Yeah.
I think that versatility, that is just so key, because it's almost like we've been a little bit contradictory. We're saying, right, we've got this individual person mechanically and we're going to make machines and stuff to fit the person, but then we have a very default way of communicating. Like, well, people have different personality types, and we spoke about this on the podcast recently, didn't we? How we've got an individual in front of us and they're going to respond differently to different words, and maybe men and women are a little bit different, and there's this kind of interpersonal climate that's going to be very different from person to person. As I'm hearing you talk, I can just feel that energy and enthusiasm, passion and sort of emotion that's coming from you, Roberta. Where does that kind of come from? Where does this kind of drive and sort of passion for clearly fitness, health, but also like communication, psychology? Where does this kind of sort of drive come from?
Probably the desire for connection, the desire for like really authentic connection, and to qualify it. like again, unfortunately, we'll always go back to my reality in terms of my experience, which is I once felt so alone, I didn't want to be here. And so when you are at that point, and I know many people in the world have experienced it, touched on it, or breathed it at least, you know, it's a really scary place. And one thing that I always had in me, and I don't know whether it was because of Disney or what, but there was this sense of hope that was quite extravagant. And it was like, there has got to be more than this. There has got to be a better quality of life. I'm seeing it on TV, I'm seeing it in other places, but my experience is not that. Now, I know there's a way out, I don't know how. So I guess my relentless curiosity was about finding ways to connect with people. But my connection in the past was inauthentic. You know, in terms of doing the work, it's not about just healing from the wounds that were inflicted on me. It's about actually how I adapted because of that. And I was bolshy. I mean, I'm loud now, but, you know, I was bolshy before, and I was, you must do. And I know the answer. The saviour complex that I was talking about a minute ago, it comes from something called codependency, and it's about not having boundaries, not being able to just care for yourself and tend to your own needs because you don't actually know what they are. You're too concerned with creating, you know, inauthentic connection with others to try and stay alive. That's how it sort of develops. And so through looking at what that is, what the symptoms of that are, I've been able to go, hold on a minute. I'm actually, for me to live my life and live it well, and I think when you lose someone who is incredibly close to you, you kind of at some point get really real that life is going to end at some point. So for my life to matter, for me to actually enjoy it and have peace and a shit ton of fun, something's got to change. And I guess it came from an innate sense, but I was really gifted because I met so many people along the way that believed in me and would tell me quite outwardly. They would, you know, before my brother died, I was in, singing was my thing. And I was on my way to becoming a West End leading lady. Like, that was my entire dream. I was practicing, I was studying, I was training. My granddad couldn't get me out of the bathroom. I was singing constantly, you know, that was my life. But when that changed, it shut down a part of me, which was my expression to the world and how I connected. It's still one that I'm very gently getting back into, because it's very emotional, obviously, after Mo dying, that I struggled to get there. But the one thing that I've always enjoyed about singing and that it gave me was connection with others, to influence people with emotion, to touch their lives. And because I was touched by music was such a wonderful thing, and people would sing, especially Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey at the time, and, you know, it was all hopeful areas of music, as if life could be great and it could be grand. And so I think my pursuit from despair has been, you know, traveling forward, and through the work, you know, I was just saying the other day, it's such a great place that I find myself in. I'm working in a company that I absolutely love and stand for. I've got a life partner with that I've got no doubt will be my forever man. And I've got a stepson who, the relationship with him is as if he's my own, and yet we've got enough respect to take space, and he's got a fantastic mum. And I'm living my life, and it's growing and changing, and I feel myself more content with the people around me, because I've learned the boundaries to qualify who's in my life that probably shouldn't be, and how am I showing up in other people's lives where I need to let them be who they are. And through that journey, I've been able to step into being an individual, which is now benefiting my work to the biggest extent.
That's a beautiful reflection.
That's really inspiring. It's inspiring and incredibly well articulated as well.
What makes me think, what I'm thinking as you're talking there is, did you think that you had to be in that dark place to be where you are now? If you weren't in that, bit way of putting this, if you weren't in that dark place, do you think you'd have what you have now in your life, with the connection, the relationships you've got, the passion you've got? Do you think you would have had that if you hadn't been in that, clearly was a dark, sort of lonely place?
I think my first response is no. I think it depends on how my journey would have started. If my journey would have started differently, just like all I'm supporting in raising Felix, is that if you create a secure and safe environment for him, and you teach him that he can go after anything he wants in life, he's got to be, you know, determined. He's going to face difficulty and challenge. He's got to develop resilience, but ultimately he's got a safe network that's got his back no matter what. I think I may have had an experience where, you know, you reach a height of contentment and you're excited and you're happy in life. And I think that because of the darkness and the despair, you know, my first original therapist told me once that you can't have outrageous love without having or experiencing outrageous pain. And I think the journey to the love that I feel now for myself, genuinely, you know, don't get me wrong, I still have my challenging days, but there is a connection there that wasn't before, which enables me to connect authentically with my partner. It wouldn't be as rich, I don't think, if I hadn't had the pain that I've experienced. And there potentially wouldn't have been a reason, if my brother didn't die, I probably wouldn't have had a reason to pursue it. Because that level of grief was killing me. You know, it was so hard. And I think the pain that came before that was present, unless it would have showed in my mental health later, which it could have done, I don't necessarily know that I would have explored my journey to the extent that I have.
Sort of there's some sort of blessing in pain, and it sort of motivates us to sometimes catapult ourselves forward. I suppose our clients are presenting with some sort of pain, aren't they? It might be actual physical pain, or they're just struggling with something in their lives, and we're trying to help them sort of navigate change. I mean, we obviously predominantly have got personal trainers listening, not just PTs. We've got lots of different types of people, but aiming at PTs. If we've got some trainers right now who maybe do feel a little bit lost, a little bit lonely, just a little bit disconnected, and feeling like they're not quite kind of authentic selves, which I've seen a lot in the industry throughout the years. Kind of PTs put on a bit of a mask, and we all need to put the best version of ourselves out there, but it's the best version of ourselves. It's still us. I mean, what kind of advice would you give them, Roberta, based from your journey and your sort of knowledge now, for those guys that are struggling, just feeling like something isn't quite right? You know, it's okay. There isn't almost a massive pain, but there's something under the surface. They think, I'm just not quite connecting.
Do you mean in their sense of self?
Yeah, just that that sense of like you're just not quite connecting.
Yeah.
I just think from your experience, you can maybe relate to that time of your life where you didn't feel connected and you didn't feel authentic, and just sort of, I don't know if there's any advice you'd give sort of coaches or people listening who are in that place right now.
Yeah, I think the first thing, to the best of your ability, is to slow down, because and it's kind of, Michael would always say, get out of the river. It'd be like, the river's flowing, you need to get on the bank. And what that for me meant was, if the water's coming at me, I haven't got time to sit and think and reflect and go, hold on a minute, that was really challenging. And so you have to get out of the way, stop swimming upstream, right? So he taught me that, and I guess it has to take a practical turn, right? You can't just tell someone to slow down, because the reality is that, for the want of a better phrase, over-functioning is there for a reason. It's serving a purpose. So I guess if you're feeling a bit lost, or you're feeling low, you feel like something isn't right, it's, first of all, it's just acknowledging that. And everyone everywhere at some point in their life will question where they are and what they're doing. And if something doesn't feel right, it is an opportunity. I'm not going to say it's easy, and it's also not enjoyable to begin with, I'm going to say. But to consider speaking to someone, and you've got to find the right person to speak to. I think I hear a lot of times when people ask, what would you say to someone who's lost? They go, speak to a friend. And it's like, no, because some friends are really shit.
Yeah.
They do not know how to listen,
Yeah.
and they will just tell you what to do. And so I think I can't remember who it was. Someone said, I follow a lot of different people.
Yeah.
I've read a lot of different things. But it's kind of like, we're all here to walk each other home. And what I really feel like that means is to learn who we are in our truest self. And by truest self, it means identifying, what are my needs? What do I like? What do I really want to do in my life? What's going to get me out of bed and make me think, fucking hell, yeah, I get to go to work today. And usually it starts by understanding all the things that are in the way. Coming back, it still does. It comes back to the barriers, right? So it's like, if I'm struggling, if something doesn't feel right, what could it be? And be open to the fact that it could be anything. Could be your responsibility of your dog right now is taking you to the ends of the earth, or your stress with work, or the feeling that you don't feel good enough, or the fact that there's people in your life that you're serving, and on the surface it seems like they love you, it seems like they're with you and that they care, but actually you're not really getting what you need. So actually, yeah, here we go. This is probably where I'd go to needs. Trying to identify what needs are. And I think you've got hierarchy of needs. You've got Maslow's hierarchy. You've got, which you can Google. And you've got nonviolent communication is excellent, because on their website, not only do they have practitioners who are empathy practitioners who will just listen for an empathy session and support you in identifying your needs, but they have lists. And I think ultimately find connection that will enable you to just express what doesn't feel right. They're probably the key things for people who aren't feeling right, if they feel like somebody else will be able to support them. The other thing that is a really strong practice of mine is journaling. This is where the communication has served me to no end, because I actually journal to myself a full-blown conversation.
Oh, that's an interesting way.
Hi, Roberta. How are you doing today? Do you know what? I'm feeling really shit right now. Oh, what's the feeling? Oh, I feel like this. I'll offer myself empathy over and over again, written
Interesting.
on a piece of paper, until I go, when he spoke to me like that, or when he said that thing to me, I really felt like, and I'll write it out and I'll re-listen to it. And the first thing always is, my now priority is self-empathy. It doesn't matter what the other person's intention is. It doesn't matter whether they didn't mean what they said. However I've took it and however I felt, I validate. And that for me, I think, is the first step to not feeling lost in a moment.
I think the reason I asked that question is because I think in our industry, a lot of trainers self-employed, they run their own business, whether they're online, offline, or a bit of both. and it can be just quite lonely, you know, and they can be quite on their own. There can be a lot of comparison. And you mentioned early on about kind of being in different environments and almost being a bit overwhelmed, and sort of those sort of conscious or subconscious limiting beliefs. You know, you were talking earlier about kind of feeling not intelligent enough and not bright enough, but you've managed to kind of overcome those limiting beliefs. And we've all got limiting beliefs. If we dig deep enough, there's plenty of things kind of holding us back.
Absolutely.
Whether that is shame, whether that is fear, whatever. And it's if you don't break down those barriers, you're just going to stay in that same place. Your relationships won't develop, your career won't develop, and you'll just have this slight underlying feeling of maybe there's some resentment, there's some frustration, there's some anger, there's a feeling of I think I can do more, but I just don't know how, and other people seem to be doing it and I can't. And it's I just see a lot of PTs, and I do some mentoring, I see a lot of people sort of wrestling with this stuff under the surface, and just sort of navigating stuff. It's very messy and it's very complex, but I've noticed in my life, personally and professionally, how it's changed the game, if I'm honest.
Absolutely.
And I think it has for you as well.
Yeah, and I think, you know, once you've lived that game change, you can't go back. And, you know, it's kind of interesting to think about it, because I'm in quite an isolated place. I'm in a very lovely place. I've got a very nice studio that I am in, and I've got a great partner that I work with. You know, I think I was in Fitness First for like 2 weeks before I went and worked at Integra.
Oh, yeah,
I literally, when I say I started fresh, I mean I was fresh.
You were.
But that meant that I actually wasn't, even though I had my own experience of comparison, I wasn't in gyms, and new trainers are in gyms with other trainers. And I think the thing that maybe we don't even sit with just out of being curious is the industry as a whole. I don't think when you come into the industry, you think about the industry, you think about being a PT.
Yeah.
And the industry as a whole, what it has brought forward in people, what it allows, is a lack of credibility and a lack of authenticity, a lack of like a support structure and knowing where to look. So you're right. Without having that, you know, like if you were to become a doctor, if you were to become a psychologist, if you were to become an engineer, you know, you go through these really particular steps over a really long period of time, and you find a community because everybody's studying at the same time, because usually it's a uni thing, or you're in somewhere doing an internship. So you build connection around your practice, and there's a deeper understanding of your purpose, what you're doing and why you're doing it, and how you do it. But in PT, there is a very short experience of an education. There is not a group of people wanting to get together, because all of a sudden, the only way you're going to get work is if you're competing against the next guy. It's not wired for connection. So I guess, first of all, if PTs are actually feeling that sense of struggle in their space, in their gym, in their career, it's actually, first of all, just acknowledging that there's a reason that you feel that way.
Yeah.
You know, your industry isn't built for you. It's just like the acting industry. It's not built to make you feel good. You're there at somebody else's demand, and you're there to fill a spot and a space. So I guess it comes back to taking some, you know, positives from finding the people that you can be inspired by and try and follow their journeys, and recognize that you're on your own journey, and that your journey matters just as much as these people that you're inspired by, and start fresh with building connections that you feel like are safe, that are fun. You know, knowledge is always a great connector, because, you know, when you come into class and go, oh, I didn't know that, and I didn't know that, it can be really inspiring. And providing you've got the environments like what Integra Education creates and other educators where they want that safe space, they want people to connect. I think that's a great way for PTs who might be feeling isolated actually to connect with other PTs who are on a positive path, is to look at the education resources perhaps, you know, because normally we're all trying to work towards something. There's a growth aspect, and I wonder if that would offer the entire industry a new way of seeing how we're going to show up to this job. It's not a short, sharp job; it's a career. It's got a journey.
There's a couple of really good points you make there, and one of them is when young trainers come into the business, I think initially the way they do it, and I know I did this, I looked at a successful personal trainer and tried to copy them, because I was like, well, you're successful, so I need to be like that.
Yeah.
Not realizing, and maybe they didn't even realize, but they were being authentic. Whatever they were being authentic. Whether they'd studied loads or were just great to be around, it didn't matter. But I got confused and was thought I just need to be like that, and lost the authenticity. And I think the point you make, which is a brilliant point, and I think about a lot, is the structure of your career is, we're people that have found our way into a structure in here. But I know early in my career, and my parents asked me this, I was like, oh, where are you going with that? Because I was in a company at the time, I was just in a big like corporate company. I was in Canon, the technology company. It's like, you go here, 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 and I have clients that are in insurance, like you're probably doing in finance, and it's very like this, isn't it? You go up, or like doctor, they know where they're going, right? And you can, of course you can sidestep, but you've got this structure. And with PT, you don't. But that can be both hard but also exciting, because on the hard side, it's like, where the fuck am I going with this? Where does this go? Am I just going to be a personal trainer in a gym? I say just, I don't mean just, but is that what I want to do, and I want to smash that? Or do I want to have a studio? Or do I have an educational company? Or do I want to move into psychology? Or where does this go? Do I want to be an online coach who lives in Dubai? So on the hard side, it's like, you almost have so much choice that it's like, how does this look for the next 30, 40, 50 years?
Yeah.
But on the exciting thing, you can make whatever you want.
Yeah.
And so it's both sides, isn't it? And I think that's a really important message to trainers, is it's difficult because there's no structure, but can you flip that and think that just means there's so many good opportunities? I really agree with you as well. The best thing, if you can just start getting on education. Yeah. It makes such a difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In connection.
Yeah, in connection and other people that I always went for mentors, like from day dot.
Right.
I went, I think, so I was doing my own training, and then I was going to go to Australia for, that 5 minutes where you just think you're going to leave the country. And then,
enough, I'm going. That's it.
Literally.
Australia.
I got the visa. I was ready to go. I was still doing my own training on myself. And then my mum came in the living room and she looked at me and I went, and I just had this face on me, and she looked at me and she went, you don't want to go, do you? And I went, no. She went, why? What's happened? She went, we've got everything ready. I went, I was on my drive back from Body Power, and my uncle Mark, who actually really supported me when I moved to London with my training, his girlfriend at the time introduced me to Phil Learney's podcast.
Okay.
And I was on my way back from Body Power, loving the first initial experience because it was so empowering. Everyone there was muscly, and they had all dedicated their life to this one thing that was super intense. And I was just in awe of it. And then I drove for 3 hours back, I think, from Birmingham, listening to his podcast. And I was like, that's it. I want to train with this guy. I want to go find out more of this information. I've got to dig in. He seems to be, people are recognizing him. He's got this knowledge. I just want answers. And I messaged him, I think that day when I got home, and he had some slots. And I told him about my journey, and Phil was kind enough to welcome me into UP Fitness over in Mayfair in the beginning part of the journey. And I was like, so what do you do and how do you do it? And he was training me, but he was sort of somewhat guiding me at the same time in terms of a career. But his advice from the beginning was go into a normal gym and get commercial experience.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to. I was like, no.
Good idea. No.
I didn't want to because I've always shortcut things. Like, well, after Mo died, there was this really strict thing that came up, which was like, if I don't like it, I'm going to change it. Sounds great, which it was many times, but it can also trip you up. But I was like, no, I don't want to go to a commercial environment. I want to go to whoever's the best, and I want to learn from them, because there is so much I was raised by my granddad, so he's going to love this that I mention him. He's not with us anymore, but I know he's here. Yeah. And he taught me everything that he knew. He would always talk about, you've just got to figure it out. You can go and find people, you can talk to people who have done it, and from his experiences, like, I've done this, I've done that, and always passed on his knowledge. And I found just listening to his stories to be so insightful. And so going to Phil and hearing his knowledge and his presentation was just like, I'm going to be able to do this. And then I worked with Elaine, and she was teaching me anatomy because I wanted to get better at being a PT. Had no idea where to start, but this stuff, was so curious about it. And then when she told me about RTS and I went and took the course, there's even more answers. There's even more strategy. There's even more ways to understand the very basics, even though the enormity of it is very complex. And I think having a journey through where you can find the best, find a mentor, seek who's done it before. Just say, I know you might not do it the same way as them, but the process of learning is imitation first.
Yeah.
So you were right, and anyone else who's copied another trainer was right to start with, but actually the growth of a personal trainer is to recognize, oh, that's how you did it, but how do I want to do it? What will really help me define myself as a personal trainer and not in competition with other people?
Yeah.
You are your own unique self. And it took me a lot to come to this podcast today, to think about showing up and being, like I would be a valuable resource. But actually I started to consider, I was like, I do have 10 years of experience in this. And not only that, I've done a lot more self-development work than a lot of people I know. And the reading that's come from that, the knowledge, the connections, and the sort of layers of understanding, I think at the right time for the right person might be of benefit. So we've all got that. We've all got experience, and it is unique to you and your perspective. And I think every trainer can bring that to their clients. They can bring their understanding of their life to their clients, not tell their clients about their experience necessarily, but there's a shared reality that can come up where it might best serve the client to move forward on the next part of their journey or the next part of their goal acquisition.
Yeah.
I think the metaphor that comes to my mind is that we're all kind of climbing our own kind of mountain.
Yeah.
And we've all made some paths that we slip down and we fall down and we learn a little bit through that next path and we go a little bit higher up the mountain. We never get to the top of it.
Mm-hmm.
And our clients are on a different mountain, and maybe we, from our view, we can see some things to help guide them up a different path, because we've experienced things maybe with exercise or nutrition as a guide, not a dogmatic coach.
Yes.
It's a guide and a sort of support network, not a you should do this.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we are on our own mountain, and maybe we look a bit higher up and we see some other mountains. Like, Phil was sort of quite an inspiring person for me starting out in the industry. I think it's 2008 I started, so it's going back a few years now. But he was around, and yeah, very inspiring. Went to some of his seminars, and just the energy I'd get from him, and some of the sort of knowledge and some of the kind of skills that I would use. And it's just, that would inspire me to go back on the gym floor and to want to use some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Because he's on his own mountain, and you take a bit from that and take a bit from someone else's mountain, and we're all learning and helping each other, and we're all navigating. And I think it's also reflecting on your own mountain, going, well, look what I've done. I don't think coaches do that enough. They don't see the value that they're standing on. They have a lot of value.
Yes.
And by all means, let's develop more value for education, but let's see where you're currently at as well. Otherwise, I remember doing my first lot of therapy, and I was chatting a lot about personal development and progression, and my therapist was like essentially saying to me, don't let this come at the cost of not acknowledging where you're at and what you've already achieved and your current strengths, rather than going, when I get to that stage of the mountain, then I've got it.
Yeah.
Then then I can speak to other people. Then I can do a seminar. Then I can make that post on social media. Then I could be good enough to go and be around these other people.
Yeah.
There's never going to be that point, because there'll be something else and something else.
Yeah.
See the value you're standing on. As we said earlier, we've all got these limiting beliefs, and just take that one step up the mountain.
Yeah.
And that will be a bit uncomfortable, and it might be a little bit of hard work. But when you do take that one step up, the kind of bar is raised, and it's a new bar.
Yeah.
And then you can go again.
I really love that. And I think you basically just summed up self-appreciation and the need for it. And even, like sitting here, I'm always inspired by what comes next. What's the next level of growth? What's the next level of figuring something out? And even now, I don't stop and reflect how far I've come. I have Michael, which is amazing because he very often reflects back. It's a great bounce of conversation of how to both lift you forward as well as go, hey, check this out, and vice versa. And I think that's why the community aspect that we're talking about is so key. Yeah. Because if the trainers that we're talking to, would like to explore communication, would like to explore coaching, it will, providing you're able to do some level of self-reflection at the same time, it will build a way to work with other people. And that, I think that's probably it, isn't it? It's how do you collaborate with someone else? How do you be around somebody else in a way where you can listen to them, listen to their experience, and take something from it in a way that's going to be valuable to you? And have a community of others where someone will say, I loved listening to that podcast. The podcast that you guys put on, that offered me so much value. And you guys to recognise, what did you say, you're on your 79th
79 today,
episode. Like, that's amazing. And that would have taken so much balls to start in the first place. I wouldn't have even known how you guys did it, let alone to get on and be so open and vulnerable and honest about your experience and willing to show curiosity to somebody else alongside what you're offering in the grander scheme of things. So I think we can all take that moment to actually go, look at how far we've come, even in this moment, you know?
Yeah, it's sort of, when you've got good people around you, Mrs. Michael as an example, he's clearly great at bringing out your strengths and highlighting your strengths.
Yeah.
And if you're in an environment where you're thinking, I'm getting knocked down, maybe it's in a romantic relationship or whatever, and you think, I don't think I'm able to be the best version of myself here. I feel like people just picking up flaws in me.
Yeah.
So I think having good people around us.
Yes.
And I suppose what I've noticed is the more I grow myself and the better version of myself I become, I naturally draw better
Towards
people
you.
into my environment. And when
Yeah.
I reflect back on especially previous relationships, I'm like, why did I draw that person into my life? Not just blaming them, but looking at me.
Yeah.
What was going on with me and my stuff is to bring that person in.
Absolutely.
And the more I've grown and developed, the more my relationships have improved with my clients and sort of with friends as well.
Yeah.
And it's a good reflection, but also I do think about what people like. For Dan, for example, we both bring our strengths up together.
Yeah.
So we know we're kind of a good partnership. If we were constantly just arguing or disagreeing or bringing each other down, you'd know there wasn't something right. It sounds obvious to say that, but listening to you talk about Michael, I can feel that he's brought those strengths up in you and great at reflecting them back in a nice, open, relaxed format.
He's just never been
beautiful.
judgmental, and it's actually annoying.
Yeah.
You know, like
It's
it's actually,
judgmental, mate. At least once.
Well, it's one of the things James picked up, like, because James
Really?
had never met Michael before we did the podcast, and so you didn't know not what to expect, not to know what to expect, having just never met him or been on the courses, and you were so impressed, weren't you, afterwards, just in him as a person, because in his non-judgmental and his conversation and him asking questions back, and you were super impressed, weren't you? So it was. Just to big that up even more. Yeah.
He is. He is absolutely non-judgmental. And I mean, we'll mess about, obviously, but in terms of anything that is a moment of seriousness, even if it's a moment where I'm putting myself down and I'm trying to make it funny, he won't go there. It's like a blank space where it's like, what are you doing? I'm not joining you on that. And it's like, oh, shit. You've just caught me out without doing or saying anything, just the actual genuine refusal to acknowledge a fault. And don't get me wrong, like he will totally support me in my reflections of where I've said, I've been resentful, I put needs on you that didn't belong to you, personally and professionally. You know, I used to do things in the business where I was like, why isn't he recognising me? Why isn't he, doing all of this stuff? And he was like, what? I didn't actually ask you to do it because I was good to do it. Like, I've run the business for 25 years. He knows this shit, just like he knows how to be a dad, he knows how to run his own household. And yet part of my learning was to recognise that I didn't have to go into that saviour complex because he didn't need to be saved.
Yeah.
He was a fully grown man. He's got this shit down. And so what happened was it started to highlight back to me where I was over-functioning. And then I could start to pull it back. And once I could pull it back, because of the non-judgment, I was able to now change my behaviour and actually redirect the energy back towards myself in a way that's going to be useful. Because he's not missing that extra layer of something that I thought I was giving, not getting recognised for. And actually now I can use it towards something that's going to help me grow as a person. And so, he is, as a human being, I love him with all my heart. And he is an incredible professional as well as a partner. And a dad, for that matter.
You mentioned something about this last week. I don't know if you remember that. So when you were sort of maybe slightly laughing as to hide something or to not make it serious, you were talking about that last week, where actually maybe if someone says something and they laugh as a security/defense mechanism, to actually maybe listen to it and go, actually, I'm not going to laugh at that because I see what's going on underneath that, and maybe draw your attention to it, because it's so easy, isn't it, when someone says something that may be quite deep and meaningful and then they laugh to take the edge off the moment, maybe, let's say, and remove the awkwardness. But maybe it needs you, and maybe you saying, I think you were saying this with Michael, and you were definitely saying this last week, to actually maybe reflect that moment back and go, that isn't funny, or not like that, not that judgmental, but you know what I mean? Just go, what do you mean by that?
Your moment,
right?
Choosing your moment. And I think bringing all of this cycling back, this is big conversation, right? This is not just communication. This is life. Yeah. But communication is the flow of it, right? The way that we're able to exchange information is we're communicating.
Absolutely.
So what you're saying there, I think I take to thinking about our clients and think, in a session, there's so much we can experience or cover in a session. Everything from what they've been doing in the last 5 minutes to something that triggered something at work that brought up a past memory or whatever. Now, the reality is, as we've started off saying, is we're here to look after their exercise component to make sure that is meeting their needs for what they're paying us for however long we're in service for them. But the communication side, giving them a really clear experience, a faultless continued experience where we don't join in judgment of them or others, which is right Brene Boundary's braving acronym. The V is for vault. And so to trust another person, vault is one of them. And it means if I come here and I start talking about somebody else and slagging them off, it's going to affect how you trust me.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I won't ever be 100% trustworthy unless I present to you the problem rather than the judgment.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
Right?
Yeah.
So in that, it's kind of like whether that person is coming in and giving you their 5 minutes of a rant on someone else who they might be friends with the next day, and we've sort of gone, yeah, you're right, that was terrible, and joined in on the negative, they're going to know that we hold judgment within us about a given situation. And as a coach, if we can be present, and this is where empathy comes in, and acknowledge what's going on for them rather than becoming part of the judgment of the circumstance, we can just help them continually cycle back to what it is within them right now that is creating the challenge or the difficulty in their experience, and how that being present in a session can affect the outcome of the session.
Massively. I think it's that empathic reflections that are just so powerful.
Yeah.
It's hard to do because one part of you wants to go on the side of the client and go, yeah, you know what? That person is a fucking dickhead. Yeah, I don't like it either. Yeah, and you're up and you're ranting together.
Yeah.
And you're going off, you put the world to rights. You're loving it.
Of course you do.
And
I've got your back. Don't worry, you're not alone.
Where's your parts? Right. I've got some right now. So there is that. But I've talked about this, is actually when a client's going off, and I've been down projects about clients who've got long-term relationships with, I'm sure you have as well.
Yeah.
10 plus years. You've got very close relationships, and you want to be inside, but actually your job as a coach is to maybe reflect back empathically, like that sounds really stressful. That sounds like it's really pissed you off, or that sounds like you're really frustrated, and that actually unpeels a layer of the problem. And you're right, the session goes in a better place. It's not both of you getting heated.
Yeah.
It's one of you getting heated, the other person taking that on board, being in a calm place, hearing those emotions, empathically reflecting them back. And it's just, again, a game changer within that session. And you've got an hour with a client, you want to make that the best you can.
Yeah.
And I've just seen some incredible transformations
Yeah.
with clients when I've applied that skill.
Mm-hmm.
But again, something I spoke about in the past is I was probably very emotionally switched off for a long part of my adult life. And as I've become more emotionally aware through therapy, through counselling, etc., from my own journey, because I'm more aware of my own emotions, I can now be more aware of others' emotions.
Yes.
But if I'm not aware of mine, how the hell can I be aware of somebody else's?
No.
So it's developing emotional intelligence within myself, even before I'm thinking about being empathic.
Yes.
Because if I can't understand myself, how can I begin to understand other people?
Absolutely.
So I suppose it brings us back to self-development again as well. But I just want to also highlight the power of that empathic reflection as well.
Yeah. That is accurate. The power of empathy is it's like the gateway to, well, you've got empathy, which is what you're saying in terms of being able to identify somebody's feelings and reflecting back. Kathy always says somebody needs to be able to feel like they are heard, understood, and respected. So they're actually 3 separate things, which is kind of interesting. And I think meeting someone where they're at, what that looks like is different. Because, somebody might want the feeling label. Some people might deny that feeling immediately as soon as we've said it, as you've probably got so much experience with. And it's the first step to the next part of the agenda. So when it comes to a session, this is where I like to get into strategy a little bit, is that the first step is receiving someone when they come in, right, when you first meet them. And it's connection. Connection is the first thing that we care about. And if there's a barrier to our connection because they've got something else going on, our empathy will bring them back to us, to this present moment. And I think it can be done in the spoken word. Today I had somebody come in who was like, totally flustered. They tried to get there really quickly. They had like 16 stories in their head as to why they were late. And the first thing I didn't even tell them what I was doing or why I was doing it. But I sat up the bench they were sweating. They felt really uncomfortable. They don't like to sweat. So I just put them on a chair with a towel and the fan on them. And said, we're going to practice some breathing mechanics. You're going to do 10 deep breaths because I want you to come back into this room before we start our session. And it's being able to, the amazing thing about being a trainer is that you can set up an environment for a person. Not even before they get in the door, you can adapt it when they get there, but you can set up something for them that is so considered that they don't know the levels of effect you're having on them. And you're planting a seed for where they want to get to. Because just take health as a basic category. People are coming to us not because they want to get worse. They don't want to regress. They want to see some form of progression. And everything from, having someone who's like a friend or a counsellor as a PT, I think is valid. I think there's always boundaries around that, but it's a really important part of connection. We're a huge part of their week.
Yeah.
Right? We're a huge part of the stressors that are in their life. And if we can design something for them where they get that hour that is like, fuck, that made my day not just endurable, but better. We've got so much potential. And I think empathy at the beginning is like step one. It's all right, I've qualified that I've met you where you're at. Here's where we are at this moment. Now, how can I get you forward through this session? And depending on the level of intensity, the goal that they're working on, whether it's injury rehab or whether they're trying to push themselves today because it's a PB testing day, how do we facilitate the energy shifts into creating this session feeling like the bollocks? Like they come out of there going, I didn't just hit my PB because I grunted my way through it. I went into that deadlift knowing that every position was solid. I squeezed every part of my body and I lifted like a pro. And then you walk out, if that's what that person likes, right? And I think communication, that is it. Like what we're developing, what we're talking about, the exercise part of the communication session, if you like, is all delivering an experience for somebody to grow.
One of the things that I always talk about, well, I always talk about it, but I mention a lot, is how my clients leave feeling after the session. And I always want my clients to leave feeling better. Now, that's not that we've just solved their life's problems in an hour.
No.
It just means whatever they've come in, and sometimes they come in great, right? And they're going to leave great, hopefully, unless I've somehow managed to diminish their mood. But for most of them, it's like you want them to come in, and the experience is the word I drew out there, because it's like, whatever the experience needs to be for them. I have a client in this morning, incredibly intellectual guy, so I just like set him off and just let him, he's interesting to listen to as well. And so he wants to train, he's got some goals, but also he likes to be able to have a conversation because he gets a lot out of that. So that's cool. And then you have another client where you're going to really deep dive into the exercise, and of course, and they want to be a part of that and really understand it. And then you have a client where it's going to be more conversation based. But one of the things I think if we're going to a slight business thing now in terms of retention of your client base is, yes, of course, results and achieving goals, it goes without saying, right?
Yes.
But they also need to enjoy it. Because if they don't enjoy it, first of all, once they achieve that goal, they might leave. But the second thing, and maybe they will anyway, because maybe they just came for that goal, and that's also fine. But if they're not enjoying their session, if they're not enjoying the process, the likelihood of them staying long term is probably quite low. So can we get everything out, but also can we get them to enjoy it? And as you say there, can they enjoy the experience? Because one of the things, we'll keep referring to him today because obviously he's a big part of my education and obviously your life, is with Michael,
He's
right?
going to love this.
He's going to love
cringe
this.
so
He's
bad.
paying for food, I think, isn't he?
Yeah,
He's paying for the rest.
He's paying for tonight. He's paying for the drinks later.
You up, mate?
He hates being sung about, so he's going to be sitting there going, I'm not listening to it, but thank you.
But it's the experience.
Yeah.
So when you come up to the course, and as you quite rightly pointed out, and hopefully Tom Purvis never listens to this, which he won't, when I think RTS, I think Michael. I've studied the Tom Purvis videos. Of course, it's Tom Purvis' thing, but I've learnt it through Michael.
Yeah, of course.
So you're completely right in the environment it creates. I haven't learnt with Tom Purvis. I don't know the environment he creates. But whether it be a one-on-one session, and I was talking to James on the way up here, because the way I met you wasn't actually through RTS. It's when I started training one-on-one with Michael.
Yeah.
And you were being there and Dan would be in there. And then all of a sudden, sometimes it'd be the four of us.
Yeah.
But it was cool because it's like the session's about me and the questions I'm asking. But now we've got a group of people coming up with solutions and answers. And so then I felt, which was one of the reasons I reached out to you for this, right? Is because I felt like I was part of Integra.
Yes.
And that's what he and you guys create. It's like, it didn't take away from my session. It made me feel a part of the team.
Oh.
But that was nice.
Yes.
And so you feel a part of that. And so that experience then, and sometimes it just be me and Michael, it might be the three of us. I was talking to James about one of the conversations we had. Where Michael actually brought you in, because me and him were in the office, but he brought you in because I was discussing, and I know a lot of trainers struggle with this because I do, how the fuck do I tell my clients that the prices are going up?
Yes.
Right? It's a tough conversation. And
It
we had a conversation about it, and you were talking about communication. But again, the experience then, feels like you're bringing more brains into the equation and more conversation and more points of view, because just because as Michael will assert to, or any of us in here, you might have an answer, but also someone else's experiences and lens can also be super useful. And for me, it's, as I reflect more and more, it's the experience as well as the results and everything else that are super important. The experience of someone enjoying their sessions and their time with you is super important. And I think that's what you guys create.
Thank you.
And I think it's so important.
I'm so glad that you enjoy that. I mean, that's the hope, because and it's always a really interesting thing. If I, probably because of my background, I'm probably more rigid in this idea of like, oh, we need to have business and structure and boundaries and all this sort of, I get a little bit strong on it.
Yeah.
And Michael is in a way where it's behind the scenes, he'll be incredibly structured, knowing what it is that he wants to do, to achieve, to say. From a professional standpoint, he can have a conversation with absolutely anyone. But in terms of how he communicates in an environment, it's very informal.
Yeah, it is.
He's so informal that he's taught me how to chill out a little bit, in that, and to still get the information across.
Yeah.
Coming back to the experience and talking about business as a trainer, I've been thinking about this lately, and I thought the thing that we do is we are people that are designing an experience for a nervous system. And I think it gets bigger. If you've done any of Jacques-Henri Taylor's work.
I haven't. Did you enjoy it? Just to quickly, did you enjoy his work?
Oh my God.
Brilliant, yeah.
That man is phenomenal.
Right.
When I went and stayed with him, he's a different version of Michael, but they've got similar, I swear they're both going to really hate this, but they've got similar souls in terms of my experience with them. Incredibly kind, exceptional knowledge, experience and practice, and a phenomenal way to make you feel included. And so when I went out with Jacques, it was an exciting, untold whim. I was going out to train with him, and I just kind of wanted to see what he did. And he basically let me roll into his life. So I got to go and stay with him and his dog Taz over in Miami, in West Palm Beach, actually. And I stayed there for a week. And it's same thing, didn't want to leave. So he let me stay another week or 2 weeks, and we did a car ride from West Palm Beach up to Maine. And the whole time, because I'd been wanting to study for RTS Mastery, and I was trying to read, and again, I wasn't in my strong point of confidence with the material, and he was constantly reflecting back and asking me questions. But the way that he would design exercise for me was from the nervous system's point of view.
Right.
And that added another layer. I mean, I had sat in an FNS course of which I was like, no possible clue what you're talking about. This is all it's all the study of the brain and understanding the pathways of the human body and what happens when there's a muscular contraction and what greater effect does that have on the nervous system. It's massive, but it's phenomenal. And I think the journey of working with Michael and exercise mechanics and his support in my behaviour change as a client, and then going through meeting other professionals, going with Jacques, going out to the US, all of a sudden, and then therapy, you've got just a reality that you're dealing with a whole person. And I think coming back to that point about retention, right? I have started to think that we don't need to think about that. If we are thinking about this person as an individual, we are thinking about the goals and we are measuring it. And you said it doesn't need to be mentioned, but it does. Because there's so many people out there that are taking money from clients and not giving them a result. They become a rent-a-friend.
Do you see that a lot?
Right?
Yeah, no, 100%.
So
I agree.
Just a little moment to pull up a bit of an awareness around that, around our professional, being a professional, being anyone requires integrity. And we have to look inward as to how we're going to qualify our own integrity. And I think we can give each other and ourselves certain checkpoints to let us know if we're on the right path. So for me, I like to know, does my client have a program? If they don't, do I know what path I'm taking their physiology in, like their joints, their bones, their muscles? Do I know from a Atomic Habits basics. Am I trying to get them to eat more protein if that's the thing, or drink more water if that's the habit that we're focusing on now? And am I in the background measuring these basics that are going to support their nervous system to be able to function in a healthier, more congruent way? Because we know less sleep diminishes mood. Bad food timing, bad quality food, tons of alcohol, all diminishes mood and the quality of life that they live. So we have an opportunity with with exercise, to deliver something where they feel something that they didn't expect to feel, or potentially originally didn't know they could feel, that changes everything for them outside and is actually void of conversation. But it impacts their life because of the effort they produced, because of the control that they showed in an exercise. That's enough. I don't need to tell that person how fucking well they did. If they smash it from start to finish of a rep and they go I squeeze that muscle to its end and I'm all right.
Yeah. Can I just go into that retention point? Because I think it's a really good point. Is that it's not going into... it's not thinking about retention, which I completely agree with. It's a nice way you put it. It's like, you don't think when a client starts, how am I going to retain this client? Because I would agree with you. I think that's the wrong thought process, actually. It's like, how can I best serve this client, right? And then hopefully if you do a good job, that's what leads to retention. But it's not the retention that's the goal. It's almost the outcome of just doing a good job, right?
It's a byproduct.
But the goal is to do the best job you can for that client in whatever they need. And then if you do that job to the best of your ability and you mold together as a partnership in what coaching really is, then does it retention. So I completely agree with that. I think don't think about retention. If you're really, really good at your job, then a byproduct is retention, right?
Yeah.
I completely agree. I think it's a really good point.
And coming back to your point earlier, like what we've been talking about with self-development, that phrase, act in service. I don't know about you, but there was a time in my life when I thought, what? What do you mean act in service of someone else? And the reason I didn't know was because at the time I wasn't in service of myself. And this entire conversation is so phenomenal, and I'm really excited to be here. It's so cool listening and talking to you guys, because it comes back to the self. For you to be excellent at what you want to do, if you can grow an arm where you're willing to look inward, where you're willing to restore yourself, where you're willing to find and make time to lift yourself up, educate yourself, rest. Like, rest is underrated.
Yeah.
Meditation practice for me before was like, oh, it's this woo-woo thing and I'm going to go here, there and everywhere in my mind. But it's not. The ultimate aim is presence. How do I be here right now with no barriers to hearing both of you and enjoying the connection that we've all got in this present moment? How do I do that? And you do that by training your attention. And that's what we're doing in exercise as well. It is Integra. I'm not going to use his name anymore.
Yeah, no, let's talk to him.
It's Integra. It's Integra. I'm not going to use his name anymore. It's the philosophy of Integra that taught me that, you could have a really high-end professional that's CEO of an incredibly large company who, is responsible for and worth whatever amounts you want to give as a level of status, right? You could bring them into an exercise experience and you could not communicate them about a struggle once, but you could deliver and drive an internal focus of a session that would leave them coming out of there reaping all of the benefits that we want them to think. Did they feel seen? Did they feel heard? Did they feel like they had attention? Did they feel like their body was capable of doing something? Did they feel challenged? Did they feel like they were included? Did they feel like this was their time? And actually, without communicating a word, you've still delivered an experience that has achieved the same outcome.
Because you've given them all the attention, right?
Yeah.
You've given them the attention within the session and the exercise
based on them.
Yeah.
And so that's what, again, it really is just so exciting for me, because I think creativity is like the ultimate freedom, right? To be creative. And they say that art and science are disconnected, and I totally believe that's inaccurate. I think science is art and art is science. And so what we're doing is actually choosing, based upon our congruent self as a professional, what are we going to offer and deliver today? And it needs to be based upon that person.
100%.
Couple words jump out at me. I think the word experience, how much how good we feel when we're having the right experience, and your right words haven't always got to be said. You just know intrinsically deep inside that was a good experience.
Yeah.
And you said today about connection. You said today about understanding, and essentially, you understand an individual, you understand how the environment affects the individual. You're part of the environment, but there's lots of other factors that you might have control over. Like you said about setting a fan up, how you set a bench up, how you set the kit up, the part of the gym that you use, all these parts to helping create a more optimal experience for the client. You were talking there about kind of the power of almost sort of stopping for a second. And this has been, I feel like this has been a sort of underlying theme of our conversation today about self-development and self-work does take a moment of peace as well. Yes, you need to be having good people around you and good conversations, but to be truly reflective, you need to kind of try and shut off from the distractions, try and shut off from the world. And that is incredibly difficult. And I think in our industry, I think me and Dan can definitely relate to this, being people who are quite energized, quite enthusiastic, you go, next client. And I was like that for a long time, and I know Dan was. And for me, being brave enough to stop, to make the space, to prioritize my own space, to try and to meditate, to try and do a little bit of this stuff, even though I find it incredibly difficult, the value that I've got through spending more time on my own, helps being single as well, to be fair, it's been an advantage in some ways.
No, it really is.
Having that time of my life to be on my own as well, that has been really transformational. But I also want to highlight how difficult I personally find it. I think a lot of people do in our modern world. We know we've got loads of distraction. Everyone's talking about it. To have that awareness and a sort of quite courage, I think, really, to go, look, I'm going to make some time for myself. I'm just going to try and meditate even for 10 minutes. And you said earlier about kind of trying to learn more about yourself and like, where do PT start? Sometimes it's just mulling over one question.
Yeah.
Like, what type of coach do I want to be? How do I want to offer value? Is something you're kind of alluding to earlier. How do I want to impact other people? How do I want my life to look? Just pick a question, just sit on it, and maybe the initial answer you give is very surface level, or how you think you should answer it. But I think I've seen a lot of value as the older I get. The value in creating space and to stop and to reflect. But not an easy thing to do as well.
No, it's not an easy thing to do, and we're not actually taught to do it.
No, we're not.
We've all long heard the expression of being on the hamster wheel, or life's hamster wheel, and stopping is not at the forefront of everyone's priority. And I guess coming back to the nervous system and using Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you've got different modes of living, and survival is the one that the majority are in some version of another, unless presence is practiced. And the reason that I say that is because presence enables you to know that right here in this moment, you're okay. And I think that's the power of being present. It's like you might have all these fears, you might have all these worries, but the actual reality of your circumstance right now, which, don't get me wrong, is for some, but it's not unfigure-outable. Everything is figure-outable. You can recognize that something has got to change. I need something to change, but you can take that moment, if you dare, and rest in it and regroup and get some space. And I think there's different ways of achieving it. For me, I recognized I was in survival mode. I actually did all of this subconsciously, and the one way that I would actually help myself was I would go and get massages. Now, again, this is a financial luxury, but it was basically, I was totally alone, and I would pay someone to tend to me. For that hour, that 90 minutes, I had someone focused on me. I think this was alongside personal training, but it was different because I didn't have to talk. And it's a space where you don't talk, and you get used to listening to something which actually calms you down.
Yeah.
Which is a part of taking care of your nervous system, getting out of fight, flight, or freeze and into a version of, homeostasis or rest and digest or just calm. And I think with that hamster wheel life, that busyness, that even if the energy is positive and it's high, it's something that needs to come down, not low to sadness, but to a state of calm. And that, I think, is where, Kathy talks about seesaw. So one of the things that you were mentioning was really making me think of a way to explain it. And she talks about, to listen, emotions need to be balanced. If someone's really, really excited and I'm trying to tell them the shopping list, the likelihood is they're going to forget. You know, if someone's really, really upset and I try to tell them the shopping list, the likelihood is they're going to forget because emotion was too up or too down in a way that it wasn't balanced, so listening wasn't able. And so in that instance, it's the emotion that becomes a distraction. And you were talking about distractions a second ago. And to turn inward, we have to understand what it is in our lives that distracts us from being present with ourselves. And what distracts us, not even from being present for ourselves, but that doesn't give us that space for calm. And so if you can't yet fathom how to be on your own and, you know, introspective, it's not natural to you, then I think finding something like a breathwork class or a meditation class or a massage, if you dare and can go, you know, or sitting in the sauna for 10 minutes if you can do it, or if you're the type of person, which I am not, that likes the cold experience or exposure, which are all good for your overall health, but actually they're a part of slowing down the mind. When there is more clarity and more ease in your mind, solutions will appear. We all have, I really believe this, an innate intuition that will guide our path as to what is right for us. But unless we reduce the distractions, the noise, and the, you know, get off the hamster wheel to actually consider it, we're not going to be able to implement change. We'll know we need it. I was in the hairdressers the other day and the girl was just constantly complaining about how terrible her employer is and how she wants to look for a new job, but she won't do it. And it's like, stop. Have you considered doing it? Is there a reason you're telling me this? Because I've heard this 16 times.
Yeah.
And actually, if they were to stop, if they were to get out of the fear by just finding ways to restore, there's answers that would fulfill our needs or their needs. And I think that's a big part of everyone's journey, is recognizing what mode are they in. Choose a method that works for you, whether it is going to the gym or going to a sauna or any of these other modalities, as a way to just bring yourself back to the present moment so that we get to redecide what you really want.
Yeah.
From any experience.
I think that's it. We've absolutely smashed this.
Yeah, I think that's a really lovely
And
way.
that's a nice way.
towards
I was
it.
thinking the same
We could carry on
thing.
chatting to you
I
for
could
2
honestly,
hours.
if it wasn't the
Well,
there's two issues. We're going to run out of time, and someone pointing that fucking aircon machine at me. I was just
Are you
thinking,
cold?
oh mate, like for the first like hour and 20,
cold, mate.
well, even because the conversation's been so interesting, I've been engaged in the conversation. Oh, don't come away from the mic. I didn't really realise it. And about 5 minutes ago, I was like, I'm fucking freezing. I looked up there, I was like, someone's pointed that at me. Which
What time is it?
then when you said about cold
Cold
I was
exposure.
like, yeah,
It
I
is
feel about
cold.
that. I think that's an awesome place
on
to
a
finish.
personal
That.
note, I've really enjoyed listening to you, Roberta. It's been having someone who is clearly quite like-minded is always nice.
Yeah.
And that's been
of course.
beautiful to hear. And yeah, I just think that to highlight that final note of just the value you get on an individual level of being fully present and fully engaged is amazing in all of your relationships and just in life in general. Hasn't even got to be in relationships, to be fair. It could be being outside, being in nature. And that self-care element is almost what you're alluding to there as well. And to sort of highlight that really to people listening is to try and find some space for yourself because you will find some answers, and it is realising that we do all have this kind of these intrinsic answers somewhere along the line. Carl Rogers really believed in that as well, and
Yes.
I believe in all that in myself and with my clients. But yeah, just to say thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it, and literally I could talk to you for another 2 hours on this podcast, but I am aware of time.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Roberta. We really appreciate it. And to all of you guys, hope you enjoy it, and we will catch you next week.